I think it's a very rude introduction. I don't know exactly why you would do something like that. And let me go a step further. I was invited here, and I was told my opponent, whether it was Biden or Kamala, I was told my opponent was going to be here. It turned out my opponent isn't here. You invited me under false pretense. And then you said you can't do it with Zoom. Well, where's Zoom? She's going to do it with Zoom, and she's not coming. And then you were half an hour late. Just so we understand, I have too much respect for you to be late. They couldn't get their equipment working or something was wrong.
Mr. President, I would love if you can answer the question on your rhetoric and why you believe
I have
that
answered the
black voters
question.
should trust you with another 4
I have
years.
been the best president for the black population since Abraham Lincoln.
Hey, everybody. Welcome into an all-new episode of Can We Please Talk podcast. As always, I'm Mike Leon.
I'm proudly stealing recruits from Ohio State on this fantastic college football video game. I am Nick Saveri.
That's right. NCAA is out there, folks. Everybody's playing it right now, except when we have to record a pod. I allow for Nick to put down the sticks. On the program today, a week that was on the campaign trail. Kamala Harris in Houston and Atlanta stops there. It says here Trump was in Chicago in front of a National Association of Black Journalists. We're going to get into all of that. If you missed any of that from this past week, we're going to be breaking it all down. And joining us to break it all down, friend of the pod, Fox News contributor. She gets ready to do Fox News tomorrow. Marie Harf. Marie, good to see you.
It's good to see you. And look, we're under 30 days until real football season. So
That's
college
right.
football is coming back, my friends.
That's right. That's right. Marie loves her Buckeyes. We're going to get into somebody from the Buckeye State who is the vice presidential candidate. We'll get Marie's thoughts on that in just a bit. Normally I say hello to Nick. I don't want to say hello to him now because I've been talking to him all day. But Marie, I want to get for you. I just teased it before that you're going to be doing Outnumbered on Fox News. We're going to talk a little bit about Trump being at the National Association of Black Journalists, because one of the people that was moderating that is somebody who you're going to be doing the panel with tomorrow, and Harris Faulkner. But how have you been doing? Like we haven't seen you in a few weeks, and obviously our thoughts were with you with the passing of your father, and you know how much you mean to us. But how have you been doing, and how has everything else been going as you've been watching all of this unfold with politics and Joe Biden stepping down, and everything that's been happening with you personally? Like, how are you doing?
Thank you. You're so kind to say that and to ask. The first thing I would say is my dad loved politics, and we would text constantly throughout the day. And there's so many times I pick up my phone and want to text him because this is crazy. I mean, it has been the most exhausting month of certainly since I was in government, right? This was personally, and thank you for mentioning my dad. He loved listening to the show when I was on. So love coming on with you guys, of course. But in the span of a month, we had the terrible debate. We had President Trump getting shot. We had this crazy Republican convention. We had Joe Biden stepping down. We had the Democratic Party coalition. This is unprecedented every day. And we should all talk about this. It's exhausting. It's stressful. So many people texted me the day Biden dropped out, the day after, and said, I didn't know how stressed I was about this. And now I actually feel like I can calm down, right? This is really high stakes stuff. Right. And every day something's changing, and it feels like the future of our country's on the line. And it feels like we are this close to Donald Trump coming back. And it's really hard to deal with and to cover. You guys do this every day, too. It is. And if we're having trouble processing it, how do average Americans take all of this in? Right. How do they look at what's happening and make sense of it and think, what kind of country do we want to live in? That's the challenge of the next 95, 96 days until election day, 60 days till people start voting. But this has been really hard. I'm just going to be honest. It's been hard.
It is. You're not wrong. It has been hard. It's been a whirlwind, it feels like, since June 27th. And obviously the lead up to the post debate, like you said, we haven't seen a president get shot at in 40 plus years. So it has been crazy, and we're glad that you're here to help us guide through some of this craziness. It makes it look like when you worked during the Obama administration that all of that was a piece of cake. Some of the things that, going to Sochi and doing some of these things, it makes it look like a piece of cake. And I want to get your thoughts too later on too about the prisoner exchange that just happened in Russia. But so let's pivot real quick and let's do what we love to do here on the show. Let's actually talk about this past week, because first, I know you've been making the rounds on Fox News Sunday and a bunch of other shows across the network. Joe Biden stepping down. You could give your thoughts if you want about that. But I was telling you this off air, and I kind of want to bring it over here. And Nick, I'll get your thoughts right after. I heard Stacey Abrams on a podcast earlier today talking about the reason why, and I think she articulated it probably the best of amongst Democrats, of the ones that were still pro-Biden. And it was, and I told you this, Marie, off air, that it was, we're going to mess this up in terms of rallying behind somebody. Well, now we're a couple weeks removed from that, and the Dems have actually rallied behind somebody in the Vice President Kamala Harris. So what do you make of Harris getting the nomination as of earlier today that just happened? What do you make of her candidacy still carrying the ticket forward? We're going to get into her VP picks in a second, but what do you just make of her overall as a candidate?
Well, look, I think Stacey Abrams is right. There was risk in abandoning our candidate, right? There are risks in both paths here. And I think Democrats came to the conclusion that there was no way to win with Biden. And with someone else, at least we had a chance. And I think why so many Democrats feel so excited today is because it's better than we just have a chance. I mean, the speed with which the party coalesced around Kamala Harris, the money, the volunteers, the excitement, the poll numbers have already, they've rebounded. They're back. They're sort of back to where a normal horse race should be at this point. And she's erased all of the Biden baggage in the polls in a week, which is extraordinary. And I think I've always thought Kamala Harris was politically underrated. I thought that, look, the 2020 primary, there's no other election like that year. I don't think we can take too much from how she ran in that race. I think she has innate political skills. I think she knows how to go after people, go on the offensive. But what I love about her right now is she's a happy warrior. Trump is angry. He's vindictive. He's bitter. He's vengeful. And she is tough as nails, but she's happy. She's smiling. She's presenting a picture of America that is positive. And she is going, it's like, when you have a friend who gets their perfect job and you just see them hitting their stride, she is hitting her stride at the absolute right time. She has played every single speech right. She's played the visit with Bibi Netanyahu perfectly. She's playing this all really well. And, I'm really grateful that the party has coalesced behind her. I'm grateful that she has taken that mantle and run with it. I feel so much enthusiasm, and I have so many friends at Fox and other Republican friends elsewhere who believe she's going to win.
We heard a similar notion from Bill O'Reilly, most famously either earlier today or maybe recently.
Interesting.
With that, when we think about that, though, something comes up to me as a Democrat as well is, was the matter of the Biden administration or coverage in general that you talked about the happy war and you talked about how effusive she's now been, in the stage that she in where she is. Was it her or was it the administration? What has sort of kept her, at least from my perspective as someone who observes this, almost seemingly like on the sidelines? Like we didn't see this type of energy. And we think about, other notable vice presidents of the past. Al Gore comes to mind. Foolishly insert jokes here, Dan Quayle as well. Like people who had a personality that was not going to be shelved. Like clearly that was part of the package of the administration. But it seemed in the case of the vice president that there was something that appeared to be muted in once the president had taken office. Is that a fair assessment? Where do you live with that?
It's a really good question because she wasn't out there the first 2 years. And when she did do interviews, they weren't her best, candidly, right? It's a really good question, Nick, about why that was. I think that she was given some kind of tough portfolios, like fixing the root causes of the border crisis. I don't know if the White House and the Biden team sort of knew how to use her and utilize her political skills, especially in a time when there wasn't an opponent we were running against. I think she's really good at litigating and prosecuting a case. But it's a really good question. And what I love about her right now is that she fought through that, right? She had a bunch of staff turnover. Like she now seems like she's in a place where she's found her voice. And it's a really good question why for the first 2 years she didn't have it, but I'm glad she found it now. And, I think that the Biden messaging operation clearly did not know how to utilize her, but some of this is the moment. Politics is about moments often. Like she has struck this cultural nerve too. That's incredibly, you can't buy that media. You can't bottle that, right? It's a great question, but I'm glad she's found it now, the right time.
It's funny because if you look at her dip in 2019, like you were mentioning in the primaries, where she has a good debate performance, and then all of a sudden over the next couple of months, she drops out, right? Because of the lack of support. And then the biggest thing, and I have found where she kind of started to hit her stride was right after the debate, going on television and kind of being the surrogate, even though we all saw Joe Biden in that debate performance, it's going to go down in history as one of the worst. But somehow she happened to be able to go on TV and talk a little bit more about the administration's overall accomplishments versus what they just saw on TV. Still couldn't sell the whole, you should still vote for him for 4 more years. But I do want to get into that enthusiasm that you were talking about and the way she's been going on the campaign trail. Let's play a little bit from her. This was her speaking in Houston when she had heard about the former president speaking at NABJ. I want to take a listen. We're going to react on the other side. So take a listen to this.
We all here remember what those 4 years were like. And today, we were given yet another reminder. This afternoon, Donald Trump spoke at the annual meeting of the National Association of Black Journalists. And it was the same old show. The divisiveness and the disrespect. And let me just say, the American people deserve better. The American people deserve better. The American people deserve a leader who tells the truth, a leader who does not respond with hostility and anger when confronted with the facts. We deserve a leader who understands that our differences do not divide us. They are an essential source of our strength. So I say to Sigma Gamma Rho Sorority Incorporated, ours is a fight for the future.
So you heard a little bit there. She's talking about, she's right. Our differences shouldn't be dividing us. We should be celebrating our differences and then trying to meet in the middle for compromise. But I did want to ask you, Marie, now that it's in full swing, next week, we got the convention coming up in a few weeks. You and I were talking about this off air in Chicago. Next week is expected that she's going to make a VP pick, as she will be in Nick's home state where he lives right now in Pennsylvania. Potentially Josh Shapiro may be at the top of that ticket. First, give me a little bit of your thoughts of the way she's been out on these campaign trails and these speeches, the upswell of momentum, but then also how much does a VP factor in here? Because she is the VP and she didn't move the needle that much. We just talked about it. We're going to play something from the former president talking about his VP doesn't matter that much. I don't know if you guys heard him say that as well in that speech. So we all agree the VP doesn't matter that much, but here's a VP running for president. Now she's got to pick a VP that we don't think will matter that much, but probably will matter much. What do you make of it, Marie?
So, well, first, I think a VP sometimes does matter. So we'll get into that. I do think, to go back to the previous question, I think she started hitting her stride in public before she became the nominee, before the debate, when she was the one out there on Roe and women's health. And they've been sending her out there on the campaign trail to talk about women's health and women's freedom. And I think that's where she started getting some of her momentum back. And then the debate, you're totally right, that night she was amazing. Look, I think sometimes VPs do matter. I think Dick Cheney helped convince people George W. Bush could be trusted to be commander in chief. I think Joe Biden was like an older white guy who helped convince Americans in Indiana and Ohio that Barack Obama wasn't scary. And I think Mike Pence helped convince voters, evangelical voters in the Republican Party, that Donald Trump, a thrice married sexual predator, was worth voting for. So I actually think sometimes they do. I think they do. I was really bullish on Josh Shapiro. Today, watching some of the angst from the progressive part of the party about him, based on Israel-Gaza policy, that I'm a little more nervous about that now. And I've been pretty bullish on Mark Kelly. I think immigration is going to be a huge issue for her and a potential albatross, and I think he's been really good on that and can be helpful. So the biggest thing you say about a VP is do no harm first. And I'm just now a little bit worried about Shapiro. I think he's an amazing governor, and I actually am probably closer to him on Israel policy than many Democrats. Politically, we are presenting a united front right now, and we cannot go into the fall igniting campus protests again, letting the right say that parts of the Democratic Party that they see out in the streets carrying Hamas flags or pro-terror. That would be not helpful for us to have that sort of dredged up fairly or unfairly. I think unfairly, but because Josh Shapiro would be picked. So that's where I am today.
Yeah, no, I'm selfishly, as a resident of Pennsylvania, I would not like to lose him, because
right.
as a state, we've done an amazing job of really tilting to a moderate center. And Shapiro's a good example of it. You see in Bob Casey, who has a good chance of retaining his seat. John Fetterman brings a very interesting vibe to the state, but certainly welcome though. As we're talking about the party in particular state, and you're mentioning some of the potential VP candidates, if we take names off the table for a second, we talked about the vice president currently as someone who brings just a much needed burst of energy and vision, as we've seen a lot of these aspirational statements, which, for anyone who listens to the show and knows where I stand on this, hope tends to win for Democrats. That usually tends to go well for the party. But if you're looking for a vice presidential nominee for this particular person in Kamala Harris, what would be within that DNA? Like, what are you looking for? I'm sort of approaching now as like scouting, right? We're talking about college football. Like, what are the things you want to see in that person?
So part of it, I think first it has to be a man. I think we have to say that. I'll say it as the lady on the panel. It probably should not be a person of color. There are a lot of voters in our country who it's almost the Obama coalition, right? Who really don't like Trump. And now it's even worse because they hate Trump. They don't want to vote for him. It's a combination of the Biden-Obama coalition. But like, a Black lady might scare them a little bit. Again, I don't like that. This is the reality. If it's someone who has some national security, military, that's why I like Mark Kelly, right? Like, he is an astronaut. Who doesn't love astronauts? But I also think it should ideally be someone who is the next generation. Like, there are other younger members. I mean, Seth Moulton, who I worked for, Jason Crow, like, there's some, Mikey Sherrill. There's some younger members who are like one step away, I think, from stepping up into that VP role. Pete Buttigieg is on the list. So I think someone that makes independent voters comfortable with a historic nominee in Kamala Harris, and that might bring some national security, experience or gravitas. That's what I'd put on my recruiting sheet, I think.
Well, I want to pivot to the former president of the United States. We've been talking about the Democratic Party. Marie's shaking her head, and Nick's already getting something to drink for people that are not watching on YouTube. So listen, I want to talk a little bit about the week he's had. We just talked about the week she's had. The week he's had has not been that great. And I don't know who is advising the former president of the United States to make campaign stops in blue dots. I'm not sure who's telling him to do this. He did a rally In my old neighborhood in the South Bronx a while ago, I didn't understand it. In the park that I grew up playing in as a kid, I don't know any Trump supporters over there in that park, in Crotona Park. Then he goes to the National Association of Black Journalists. For what reason, I don't know. Supposed to be an hour-long interview moderated by 3 Black females, one of which you happen to know, Marie, and we'll be doing a show with her tomorrow, and Harris Faulkner. And it got a little bit off the rails. I don't want to play all of it here for people, but I do want to play something that's important because it was about the way he's shaping his campaign to pivot to Kamala Harris. It's not going great. Take a listen.
Vice President Kamala Harris is only on the ticket because she is a Black woman.
Well, I can say, no, I think it's maybe a little bit different. So I've known her a long time indirectly, not directly very much. And she was always of Indian heritage, and she was only promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know she was Black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn Black, and now she wants to be known as Black. So I don't know, is she Indian or is she Black?
She is always identified as a Black woman.
I
She went to a
respect
historically
either
Black
one.
college.
I respect either one, but she obviously doesn't, because she was Indian all the way, and then all of a sudden she made a turn, and she became a Black person.
Just to be clear, sir, do you believe
I
that
think
she is
somebody should look into that too when you ask continue in a very hostile, nasty tone.
So hold on. Before we all start laughing, couple things. I'm of 2 descents, right? Like I'm an Afro-Cuban Puerto Rican kid. So, just because I've been, yelling Yo soy boricua pa que tú lo sepa like the whole time and going to Puerto Rico WBC games doesn't mean that I can't go relate to my Cuban side. Like I haven't suppressed it. So that's the first thing. Just kind of wanted to get that out there. I'm not sure if he knows that JD Vance's kids are mixed. So maybe he doesn't know how that works. So we're going to leave that there for a second. But that whole interview to me, Marie, and Nick and I were texting about this, but that interview to me, not only is it, you're a former campaign manager, when something is bad and not to put your candidate in harm's way. So I'd love to get your perspective on that, because to me, it's wild for him to go do this. The only thing I could think of is that Harris told the campaign it would be okay because she's co-moderating and she would make sure that there's a soft landing spot. And you saw different times during that she tried to pivot the conversation and he just couldn't help himself. I'm down here in Florida, very red over here, as you all know, and the former president won this state in 2020. And when I talk to people down here that are Republican voters that are going to vote for Donald Trump again, the biggest thing I hear from them is, I wish he would stop saying the same stuff. Mm-hmm. Because saying the same stuff, you already got me. You're not going to get somebody else. And so I'm curious for you, the way he's had to pivot now to he's the old guy versus the Black woman who's also half Indian. I don't know if he doesn't know how that works. So what do you make of his pivot shift and the way he's doing it and the tone? And then what do you make of campaign manager hat on? Why is he doing these? Why is he doing these events? You're not going to garner any votes by going to the National Association of Black Journalists conference.
I mean, what a wild ride that event was. So first, I think those 3 Black female journalists did an amazing job trying to pin him down in a really tough conversation. And, Harris is my colleague at Fox, and she asked him some tough questions, right? She said, it's been a rough week for JD Vance. She tried to pin him down on some things. And so look, those women tried to do the best they could. I think they set up their entire campaign to run against Joe Biden. Their campaign believes deeply, when it was Biden, that they could get more of the Black vote. They believed those polls that that the Black voters were going for them in ways we hadn't seen them go for a Republican in the modern presidency. And so one of their fundamental tenets of their campaign pre-Kamala taking over was to go after Black voters. We have seen in the last week, they have been unable to pivot to her being the nominee. There is no way they are getting Black voters when Kamala Harris is the nominee. Like, that is an absurd, I think it was probably absurd to begin with, but it's certainly absurd now. And you could even see it in that event. There were so many times he would say, he's been the worst president for inflation. And then he'd say, oh, and she has been too. Their whole campaign is focused around Biden. And that's why I think he went, because he thinks he's making inroads with Black voters. And what you saw there is that he cannot help but be himself. This bullshit talk about unity, going into his speech at the convention, all of this nonsense, he is physically incapable of not being who he is. Racist, offensive, repulsive. And Rachel Scott asked a tough but fair question, and it's like he couldn't not attack her. And he does not know how to run against Kamala Harris. He does not know how to get on the debate stage with her when she's going to be saying those things to him. He does not know how to prosecute a case against her without looking like an insane person. I believe that deeply. Doesn't mean she's going to win in a landslide. Doesn't mean it's going to be easy. That's what you saw at that event. He does not. He does not know how to do this, and he thought he was going to.
Perhaps his saving grace may be his vice presidential nominee, who seems to be potentially even more dumpster fire.
Totally.
Marie, you are the resident Buckeye on this show, so I have to lead with this question.
Mm-hmm.
Who is more liked in Ohio currently, J.D. Vance or Ryan Day?
Oh God, that's a really good question. That's such a good question. I mean, I think it's a real toss-up, Nick. Brian Day gets one more chance to beat that team up north. That's it. J.D. Vance ran 20 points behind Mike DeWine in Ohio. He ran way behind Donald Trump in Ohio. To steal the Harris Lines campaign, like J.D. Vance is weird. And they picked Vance, and I've talked to people in the Trump campaign or orbit. They did not think Biden was dropping out. They did not think he was. And Vance was a base pick. They thought they were running up the numbers in base states. And then he did. And then Kamala took over the party. And now Vance's comments about women and abortion. I mean, and he's just weird. I don't know if you watched the interview he and Trump did together with Jesse Waters, like the day or two after the convention. He kept, sir, this is why I think you've been, he's weird and he is extreme. And people in Ohio don't like him. First of all, he's not from Appalachia, A, but he's not from the part of Ohio that's Appalachia. B, his book was pretty offensive to a lot of people in Ohio, particularly in Appalachia, about how it was their fault that they couldn't get ahead in life. And he's kind of an asshole. And there's a reason he ran double digits behind Mike DeWine, who's like not a MAGA guy. He's not like a base guy. People don't like him. And he didn't live in Ohio. Like he seems to kind of disdain Ohio. I don't know.
With that in mind, he managed to beat who I thought was a pretty solid candidate, Tim Ryan.
Yeah.
Was there potentially a different version of Vance that we saw that ran in that race and the spotlight has changed? Or there seems to be this transformation because we've also seen people come forward and say, this is not the person that I knew, like as a college roommate and other people who have been a part of him. So can you shed any light on, like, has there been sort of a transformation for the version of him as vice presidential nominee? I can eventually say that correctly, versus the person who won a recent election?
Well, I think a couple things. First, I mean, he called Trump American Hitler. Like he's had a massive transformation on Donald Trump. Massive in the course of how many years? Not that many. Ohio's a red state now. Look, Tim Ryan was a good candidate, and I think Sherrod Brown, knock on wood, will win this cycle. But he's like a unicorn in Ohio politics now. I mean, it makes me sad. My home state is a pretty red state now. And J.D. Vance being endorsed by Trump, and these clips they've been playing, he would say on Tucker's show or, one of these far right-wing podcasts. He's very good at code switching, and he would go on, mainstream media and not say that childless cat ladies shouldn't get a vote or whatever, So I think he's really good at, I think he's really wishy-washy. I mean, he said Trump was Hitler. Like, how are you now like, how is that something that you can just change? It doesn't feel like it. So I think Ohio's a red state, and I think he has probably changed.
Quick break from the pod, as always, to tell you about our friends over at Fresh Roasted Coffee. Delicious tasting coffee that fuels me and Nick every episode. And now it's the summer months. It's hot out, iced coffee, cold brew, tea, iced tea specifically. Got to have all these drinks in these summer months. Nick, you a cold brew guy over there?
Yeah, absolutely. The second that the weather gets hot, my coffee gets cold. Damn, that was a nice line, actually.
That's all
but
right.
yeah, I just recently tried the cold brew. I was super excited about it. I definitely drink a lot of iced coffees and cold brews from different places. I order everything from Fresh Roasted Coffee, so the fact I can now get my cold brew as well from there, I'm totally in.
I knew you would be. And for the people out there that are listening, as always, thanks for supporting Fresh Roasted Coffee, because the blends, the flavors, the roast, you can go to their website by clicking the link in our show notes right now. Put in some cold brew into the shopping cart. When you get to checkout, enter in the promo code, can we please get 20, all one word, can we please get 2020? You're going to get 20% off that first purchase. Well, I want to get your thoughts on, or staking on the former president for a second, because we were talking about this at the beginning of the show, the craziness of the political calendar over these last 3 to 4 weeks, a debate, an assassination attempt, a convention, a new nominee, another convention. Let's go back to the assassination attempt. Let's not gloss over the elephant in the room here. Marie, you've worked for the CIA before. You've worked for the State Department. You've seen some of these hearings potentially in person on Capitol Hill. I want to get a little bit of your thoughts on, and you can kind of funnel into the assassination attempt overall and the security failures that happened that day. But there was a lot that went on over the last 7 days that maybe the American public hasn't paid attention to, from the Secret Service director going on Capitol Hill to talk to lawmakers, then stepping down. Now the acting secretary is taken over. He was hit with a bombard of questions from both Republicans and Democrats. And like I've maintained on this show, it's not about, nobody wants to see Donald Trump get killed. We just don't want him to be president anymore. And so we do need to get to the bottom of why there was such a massive failure of a 20-year-old kid just being able to get on a building randomly in probably one of the most secure locations out there. I want to play a little bit of the hearing first for you, and then I want to kind of get your thoughts on the failure itself and where we go from here. So take a listen to this.
As the person who made the decision to send Donald Trump onto stage knowing that you had a security situation, has that person been relieved of duty?
No, sir, they haven't.
Has the person who decided not to pull the former president off of stage when you knew that, in your words, the locals were working a serious security situation, has that person been relieved of duty?
No, sir. Again, I refer you back to my original answer that we are investigating this through a mission assurance. And as opposed to zeroing in on one,
what more do you need to investigate to know
exactly what the decision-making process was?
To know that there were critical enough failures that some individuals ought to be held accountable?
What I need to know is exactly what happened, and I need my investigators to do their job. And I cannot.
A lot of people didn't do their jobs.
I cannot put my thumb on the scale, otherwise.
What do you mean put your thumb on the scale?
You're asking me, Senator, to completely make a rush to judgment about somebody failing. I acknowledge this was a failure of the Secret Service.
Is it not prima facie that somebody has failed? A former president was shot.
All right, Marie, first, what the hell is a mission assurance? You're going to have to explain that to us. That's first and foremost. That was driving me nuts. I'm like, I heard that from the acting Secret Service director. I heard that from the outgoing Secret Service director. You're going to explain that in a second. But to the serious part of this, and, again, if this had been President Biden, right, we all would have been up in arms about this. It doesn't matter who it is. There's only like 6 or 7, or Jimmy Carter passed away. So like, there's not that many people that are formerly
passed away yet.
Oh, not yet. Oh, okay. We got that.
Thank you.
We added that out.
We added that out.
I think he's in hospice. I think. And I was like, Shit, someone just broke news.
We edit that out.
I get a news alert.
We
That
edit
stays
it
the
out.
blooper reel,
All
but
right.
it doesn't go.
All right, or we keep it in. It doesn't matter. So only a few people get Secret Service detail. So explain to us first, from your interpretation of what took place, the how this is all done in terms of these local law enforcement, Secret Service, all working in conjunction, doing reconnaissance work weeks prior of the location to make sure that it is secure. And then what do you make of the failure? And then please explain what a mission assurance is on an investigation front.
So look, election years are really tough for the Secret Service because they have a lot of protectees and they have big events that have a lot of potential vulnerabilities. The Secret Service for years has been under fire. I mean, if you remember during the Obama administration, a bunch of them got in trouble for misbehaving in Cartagena. Like, this is a very overworked, I would probably say under-resourced organization that has a massive mission. That's one mess up is all you get, right? So clearly, and look, we've seen local law enforcement come out this week and say, I don't know why they're blaming us. We spotted this guy and said something over a radio. There was a really interesting New York Times story today about how there was the technology that the Secret Service either wasn't using or wasn't working. A local law enforcement guy saw him, radioed it, but it didn't make its way to the Secret Service. Clearly, they need like a top to bottom, nuts to bolts look at how they do protectee work, because clearly there was a top to bottom failure. And I'm glad the Secret Service director resigned. She was horrific in front of Congress. I don't know if they just hung her out to dry and wouldn't let her say anything and then let Christopher Wray say it the next day, or if she didn't want to. I don't know what happened there. I do think they should let the investigation proceed before they start firing people. I understand the point that the senator was trying to make, but like, I do think there needs to be some due process here. And the other thing, and this is, it was awful. It was horrific. I remember when I heard and looked at my phone, it was one of the worst things I've ever seen in my life. You know, an American former president getting shot. One of the reasons people said that they didn't see him as necessarily a threat until he climbed onto the roof was that there are a ton of people at Trump rallies who are carrying guns. And a ton of people at Trump rallies who carry long guns. And this is just something that's seen at these rallies. And so there are people saying it didn't look unusual. If you remember on January 6th, he told the Secret Service not to use magnetometers to basically wand or screen people coming onto the ellipse where he was speaking, because he reportedly said, they're not after me. They're not going to come after me. None of this means the Secret Service needs to do everything they can to protect him. They failed, and people should be held accountable. And they need to figure out what they're doing, because it was really scary. But we do have this insane gun culture in our country. And it wasn't until too late that they saw that he was a threat. And the Secret Service, you know, I don't know if these reports are true that the Trump campaign wanted more security and they didn't get it. I worked for Barack Obama, and I was constantly terrified that something was going to happen to him. The threats were off the charts. It's really scary, and the Secret Service is clearly not up to it right now.
Yeah, Marie, to that end, what do you think then in the Harris campaign? Obviously, that happens before the announcement from President Biden that he's not seeking a second term. I'm kind of wondering, did her detail then change when she becomes the presumptive nominee for the presidency? Like, from what you know about sort of how protocol is set up, because I guess I was confused because you have a former president. This is a person simply running for office. I wasn't aware of the level of detail that person is supposed to have directed to them. But as now the Democratic nominee is different now, what do you think has started to happen on that side?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, well, first, most former presidents don't have a full detail. Trump now has one because he's also a nominee again. So like when Barack Obama became the nominee in 2008, he got a full detail, right? John McCain had a full detail. Mitt Romney had a full detail. The vice president, as far as I know, would have a full detail as vice president. She's one heartbeat away from the presidency. But what I would say, Nick, is that I have a feeling they are her detail, Trump's, Biden's, Vance's, like they are taking even more precaution. I have a feeling everything's been buttoned up a lot more. I will be curious to see about outdoor rallies, right? Outdoor is really hard to control. And I'll be curious to see what the DNC is like. But I just can't imagine. Those jobs are just they're so difficult. And you know, as we've seen unfortunately too many times in our history, if someone really wants to get close enough, it's often they can, right?
Yeah. Right.
And that's awful. And that's and like we try to put our presidents in a bubble, right? We try and wrap them in this protect and you know, they push against it, right? They want to go do stuff. They want to go do outdoor rallies. They want to, you know, Obama famously like hated this, you know, constricting nature of it. But there's a reason for it because our politics is really crazy right now.
There's a lot of bad actors out there. I did want to, speaking of bad actors, great transition, Mike. Bibi Netanyahu was in DC recently, Marie. Marie, obviously, since we're recording this just broke I want to say about 24 hours ago, where Hamas's top political leader was killed in an airstrike that happened in the Iranian capital. And there was video of him earlier in the day meeting with Iranian leaders. And obviously, I'm assuming now Israel has been pledging to take out some more of Hamas's leaders. And here's a perfect example of it. But just before the week prior, Bibi Netanyahu was in DC giving a speech before Congress. The latest that's happening with the war in Gaza, there's no let up in sight. There's still hostages outstanding. We have the prime minister who does not have, well, he has a decent approval rating now in Israel because of the war and what happened October 7th. But the fact that hostages have not been released as many, that support is starting to wane. He comes to DC, he gives this speech in front of the House, the chambers. What do you make of the speech and what's been playing out with the war right now? Because this was an issue and a rallying cry for the last couple of months before this on college campuses as they were winding down in their spring semesters. And we saw all these protests. Now we're here in the summer. And now because of the recent events that have happened here in American politics with the debate, with the assassination attempt, with the convention, it seems like Israel-Gaza has kind of shifted back in voters' minds. And now here's Bibi Netanyahu potentially bringing it back to the forefront. What do you make of it all?
Well, first, I will tell you, I spent a week in Israel in June and was actually on an overnight flight back from Tel Aviv when the debate happened. And I was with a group of Democratic political operatives, and we were all watching on our computers and following it together. It was this very surreal experience watching this debate while in the air coming back to Israel. And it was a wonderful trip with my friends at J Street. And just being there, you know, I hadn't been there since the Obama administration. And what's happening in Gaza, I mean, look, you go to the kibbutz, you go to the communities that Hamas attacked, and it is worse than you can imagine. It's one of the worst things you've ever seen in your life, and it is horrific. And then you hear the Israeli warplanes above. You can hear them dropping bombs in Gaza. And you think not only is it a moral failing that they are executing the war the way they are, but it's a strategic failing. And if the goal is to prevent Hamas from being able to attack Israel in the future, what they're doing will not get you there. And just ask Israeli generals who are retired that question. What's so fascinating about the Hania strike or the Hania bomb in Tehran, they clearly know how to be precise when they want to be. Like they targeted one person with a bomb in one route, right? Like or Beirut, where they targeted a senior Hezbollah leader. But what was most heartbreaking to me in Israel was Gaza is heartbreaking. We know it's a humanitarian catastrophe. We also know that I believe Hamas should be defeated. I believe that they are an existential threat to Israel. But where any chance of a two-state solution is being destroyed is the West Bank. It's not Gaza. And every day the Israeli government is approving illegal settlements, taking Palestinian land. I saw a Palestinian school that had been torched by settlers the day after October 7th. I visited a Palestinian community where an activist home was destroyed that morning by the IDF. And I'm a Zionist deeply. And you go to the West Bank and you think, this is not what I think Zionism is, and this is destroying any chance for peace. And there are 7 million Palestinians and 7 million Israelis, and they're not going anywhere. And Bibi, I think, has done more to destroy the concept of a Jewish democratic state than any other leader in Israel's history by his extremist, racist behavior. And coming to the United States Congress and giving that performance is so deeply offensive to me as an American and a Zionist that, he just never ceases to amaze me about how low he will go to protect his own political future and stay out of jail.
Strong words. I mean, there is
Sorry,
nobody.
that was a long answer, but it was a very powerful trip. And anyways, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, and I'm very glad that this is why we have people on the show like this that are, I've been doing this work. I got to hear who some of the Democratic operatives were. That's for the Patreon version. So we'll save that, Marie. Marie, I can't thank you enough, as always, for coming on the program, giving us a couple of minutes. Continued success to you. We're going to watch you tomorrow on Fox News. For people listening to this episode on Friday, check out Marie on Outnumbered at 12 noon, I believe it is, on Fox News.
12 noon Eastern, and a special one lucky guy in the middle of the couch tomorrow that's never been on before, so you have to watch and see who it is.
Ooh, that's called a teaser in the business. As always, you can check out the video portions of our interviews with Marie or anybody else you've seen on this program. Head over to our YouTube channel, type in Can We Please Talk Podcast. We should pop right up. Audio podcast platforms, you know them by now, Apple, Spotify, Google. Shout out to everybody who listens to us over on Good Pods. Shout out to Acast, our hosting platform. We can't do it without them. We can't do it without each and every one of you that watches this program, listens to this program. As always, I am Mike Leon.
Despite not liking Ohio State, I am a fan of Marie Harf. I'm Nick Saveri.
I echo that as well. We'll see everybody next time.